Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be exploring a pretty cool concept, turning obstacles upside down.
Yeah.
Not just like getting over them, but really thriving because of them. Finding that formula, that kind of alchemy,
I love that.
where you take those difficulties and turn them into fuel.
Absolutely.
And to do that, we're going to be looking at historical figures,
Okay.
philosophers,
Yeah.
different people who've kind of tackled this idea.
Love it.
We'll be drawing some insights from a book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Oh, fantastic book.
Have you read it?
Yeah, I have. It's one of my favorites.
It's a good one.
Really powerful stuff.
Yeah. And for this deep dive, we're going to start by looking at someone who I find very fascinating, John D. Rockefeller,
Wow.
during the Panic of 1857.
Interesting.
So imagine you're a young guy just starting your career in finance.
Yeah.
And boom, biggest financial crisis in history hits.
Oh, yeah. An economic earthquake.
Total earthquake.
You'd expect someone in that position to just freeze up completely.
Right?
Give up on those dreams entirely.
Totally.
Yeah.
But Rockefeller does the opposite. He jumps right into the chaos.
Really?
Yeah, instead of despair, he studies what's happening.
Wow.
He learns from other people's mistakes and sees kind of where their weaknesses led them.
So he's using this meltdown as like a learning experience.
Yeah.
His own personal school of adversity.
Exactly.
Like that.
And that became a hallmark of his entire career.
Wow.
It was his ability to stay calm in the face of chaos.
Mm.
There's this story about a group of investors who gave him this massive amount of money to invest in oil wells.
Right.
But instead of just rushing into a deal, he takes a step back.
Okay.
He analyzes everything carefully,
Yeah.
and he decides to return the money.
What? That's discipline.
It is.
He had the foresight to see that the opportunity maybe wasn't right.
Yeah,
Even though everyone else was probably clamoring for oil,
right.
he's like, no, this isn't the right time.
It's not the right move.
Powerful lesson for all of us.
What do you think's the takeaway there for our listeners?
Even in a crisis, we can choose calmness over panic, right? We can use it as a chance to learn and grow,
Yeah.
just like Rockefeller did.
So that makes you wonder, what were your own schools of adversity?
Yeah.
What were those valuable, maybe even painful lessons that you learned from those times?
Right, because everybody's got them. You know what else is interesting about Rockefeller's story?
What's that?
It really highlights how important perception is.
Okay.
It's not just about what happens to us,
Right.
but how we choose to see it and understand it.
It's like that saying, life is 10% what happens to you,
Yeah,
90% how you react to it.
exactly. And that's where perception becomes a real superpower.
Okay.
It can be our greatest strength or our biggest weakness.
Interesting.
How so? It all depends on how we use it. You know, one thing that really blew my mind in the book
What was that?
talks about how our brains are still wired to react to threats that don't even exist anymore.
What do you mean?
Like, getting a stern email from your boss can trigger that same fight or flight response
Oh, wow.
as like our ancestors facing down a saber-toothed tiger,
That's wild.
isn't it? We're carrying around this ancient hardware
Right.
that's not always equipped to deal with all
Yeah.
the complexities of the modern world.
So how do we bridge that gap?
Well, the Stoics had some really brilliant insights about this.
Okay.
They were all about learning to control our emotions and filter out those knee-jerk reactions so we can see things clearly.
Even when things are tough.
Exactly. Even in the middle of a stressful situation.
So it's not about pretending things aren't tough. It's
Wow.
about choosing a more helpful way to look at them.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the obstacles the way actually gives us some really practical tools for doing this.
Like what?
It talks about being objective,
Okay.
controlling your emotions,
Mm-hmm.
finding the good in every situation,
Right.
not getting swept up in what's bothering everybody else,
Okay.
and focusing on what you can actually control.
It's like building this mental toolkit for dealing with challenges.
Yeah, I like that.
And, thinking back to Rockefeller,
Mm,
his ability to see opportunity where everyone else saw disaster
right.
was a key part of his success.
Absolutely. That's the power of perception in action.
Yeah.
It allowed him to stay calm, think clearly, make those rational decisions when everyone else was panicking.
I like that.
Oh.
So is there a situation in your own life right now where
Yeah.
you could benefit from shifting your perception a bit?
Ooh, that's a good question.
How could looking at things maybe a little more objectively
Right.
or just more calmly change your approach? It's like the book says, in some ways, the obstacles we face now might be even trickier than what our ancestors had to deal with.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, it talks about things like abundance technology comfort as being obstacles themselves.
Huh. That's interesting. What do you mean?
Think about it. We live in a world where, for a lot of people, the biggest struggles aren't about basic survival.
Right.
It's not about finding food or shelter.
Yeah.
It's more about these internal battles.
Oh, I see. What you're saying is it's more mental and emotional now.
Yeah, like the constant pressure to achieve, the fear of missing out,
Right.
that overwhelming amount of information we're bombarded with every day.
It can be paralyzing for sure.
Totally. So instead of struggling to just exist,
Yeah.
we're wrestling with these deeper questions of purpose and meaning.
Those can be tough obstacles to overcome.
For sure. And that's why the book emphasizes the need for a new approach,
Okay.
one that's kind of equipped to deal with the unique challenges of the 21st century.
So, like, what kind of approach are we talking about?
It's about cultivating this inner resilience
Mm-hmm.
that lets us not just survive the tough times,
Mm,
but actually use that energy to push us forward.
I like that.
It's about taking those inner obstacles, the self-doubt, the fear of failure, those limiting beliefs,
Right.
and turning them into something that helps us grow.
So it's not about getting rid of the obstacles completely.
Exactly.
It's about changing how we relate to them.
Yeah. And the book uses this great metaphor, the obstacle is the way.
I've heard that.
Have you heard the Zen story about the king, the boulder, and the peasant?
I think so. Remind me how it goes.
So the king wants to teach his people about resilience, right?
Okay.
So he puts this giant boulder in the middle of the road,
Uh-huh.
leading into the city. And then he hides and watches to see how people react.
What happens?
Well, most people are just stopped in their tracks. They complain, they give up, they turn around.
Right. They let the boulder defeat them.
Exactly. But then this lone peasant comes along,
Okay.
and he doesn't see the boulder as a roadblock. He sees it as a challenge.
I bet he got creative.
He did. He eventually manages to move the boulder, and guess what?
What?
He finds a reward underneath it.
So the obstacle actually led him to something good.
That's the point. It's not about just removing the obstacle.
Right.
It's about what we become in the process of overcoming it.
We discover those hidden rewards.
Exactly. The resilience, the resourcefulness, maybe even a new sense of purpose.
It's those moments of struggle where we often find our greatest strength.
I agree. And the book goes on to list all kinds of obstacles that people face.
Like what?
Things like size, race, financial limitations,
Yeah.
fear, self-doubt, societal expectations, all sorts of stuff.
It's amazing how many people have taken those things and turned them into advantages.
It is. The book talks about athletes who were told they were too small.
Really?
Yeah. Pilots with less than perfect eyesight,
Wow.
thinkers who were ahead of their time.
Wow.
It reminds us that limitations don't have to define us.
They can actually be fuel for extraordinary achievements.
Right. Like that saying, smooth seas don't make skilled sailors.
Love that one.
So for everyone listening, I want to challenge you. Think about an obstacle you're facing right now.
Okay.
What hidden opportunity might be concealed within it?
Ooh, good question.
How could you turn that into a path forward, even if it leads you in a totally unexpected direction?
The obstacle becomes the way.
Exactly. So let's recap what we've learned in our deep dive today. We talked about the power of perception,
Right.
how we can choose to see obstacles as threats or as chances to learn and grow.
It's a choice.
We also talked about the importance of action, how obstacles teach us valuable lessons and make us more resourceful.
And more resilient.
And finally, we were reminded about the incredible strength of the human spirit.
Mm-hmm. History is full of inspiring examples of people who overcame huge obstacles to achieve incredible things.
It is. And like the book asks, are you worthy? Can you get past the things that inevitably fall in your way? Will you stand up and show us what you're made of?
Those are some powerful questions to ponder.
If you want to keep exploring these ideas, we highly recommend Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way.
Yeah, that's a great read.
It's full of wisdom and practical strategies for turning your obstacles into opportunities.
So remember, you have the power to choose how you respond to challenges. You can let them define you, or you can use them to define yourself.
So go out there and turn those obstacles into stepping stones on your journey. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.